What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is part 2 of my 3-part sport collection series. Today's video is on the 2021 PBA bear pattern. Stay tuned after the intro. Alright, so like I said in the intro, today's video is going to be on the 2021 bear oil pattern. The last video was on the 2021 Viper, and then the next video was going to be on the 2021 Shark oil pattern. Now, before we get into all the details and everything, I just want to say that this bear pattern was extremely hard. This pattern was not easy. Now, what makes it so much harder than a typical house shot? Well, like I've mentioned in the past, the typical house shots have a really high ratio where there's a lot of oil in the middle to create hold, and there's not a lot of oil on the outside to create extra friction. So if you miss right if you're a righty, or if you miss left if you're a lefty, there's going to be a lot of hook and the ball can recover. And then if you miss in the oil, the ball is just going to sit there because of the extreme high volume of oil. Well, on this 2021 bear oil pattern, the ratio is 2 to 1. So typically the typical house shots are like 8 to 1, 9 to 1, 10 to 1. This bear is 2 to 1, so it's very, very flat. So if you miss right, there's a lot of oil there and the ball is not going to recover. And then if you miss in, because that ratio isn't very high in the middle, the ball is going to hook a ton. So this bear pattern is 41 feet. Like we said, it is a 2 to 1 ratio and has a 30.8 mils. So it is a lot more oil than a typical house shot, and it's much flatter, making this pattern, the difficulty of this pattern, very high. If you guys like these kind of videos where Andrew and myself are bowling on these sport shots, I would super appreciate if you guys hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so that you can stay up to date every time I drop a new video. It helps me a ton the more you guys hit that like button and the more you guys subscribe. Plus it's free and it helps the channel. Down below in the description, I have links to everything that I used to make this video, from the camera all the way down to the bowling balls on the lanes and everything in between. So remember in the last video on Viper that I mentioned that Andrew and I broke them down the absolute right way and the pattern went from difficult to significantly more manageable? Well, in this video, we did not break them down the right way. Our plan of attack was to try to play them as straight as possible to develop a hook spot for later, but for whatever reason, once the lights came on, Andrew and I decided to play them a little bit too far to the left to start. So as we developed early hook, we had nothing built to the right. So if we missed right, we had nothing. Comment down below and let me know if you guys have ever bowled on any of these PBA patterns and what you think of them compared to your typical house shot. So taking the rule of 31, like I showed you guys in the last video, you want to take the length of the pattern minus 31, and that is where you want your bowling ball to be at the end of the pattern, ideally. Now, the type of bowling ball that you use, the amount of surface that you use, and your rev rate, and the lane surface will dictate a lot of where you play on the lane. This rule of 31 is more just a starting guide. So if we take the length of the bear, which is 41 feet, minus 31 is 10. So at the end of the pattern, you want your ball to be around the 10 board, ideally. So the balls that you're gonna see thrown in this video are Andrew threw the Forge Fire, then he threw the Venom Shock, then he threw the Jackal Flash, and then he threw the Fatal Venom. And then for me, I started with a Forge Flare, then I went to a Jackal Flash, and then I finished it off with a Venom Shock. I'm gonna take you guys on the lanes now so you can see Andrew and myself navigate this bear oil pattern. Thank you guys for joining Andrew and myself as we navigate through this extremely brutal 2021 PBA bear oil pattern. Now, on a pattern like this, there is an absolute premium on breaking them down the right way. And what I mean by a pattern like this, I just mean how flat this pattern is and how much volume there is. When you're bowling on a typical house shot, it really doesn't matter too much what part of the lane you start on, because you can always chase it left because of the amount of friction there is to the outside part of the lane. But because this pattern is so flat, you cannot start too far to the left, kind of like what we did, because then as you transition, you're going to develop early hook and have nothing to the right. In this video, Andrew and myself started way too far to the left, and they actually got harder and harder as we went on because of that early hook and because there was nothing to the right because we had nothing developed. In talking with Andrew afterwards, we agreed that we both could have started with either less surface or less ball, or a combination of the both. I think that this Forge Flare for me looked really good on the fresh, but again, I think it was too much surface and I was too far inside, And the same is true for Andrew and his Forge Fire. I really think that we both could have started with either less surface on our balls, or maybe even started with a Venom Shock with obviously less surface, just to be able to play them as straight as possible and break them down the right way. Kind of like we did in the last video, where we played them a little bit more up the lane to start, and then the pattern became easier and easier, instead of like this on Bear, where it actually got harder and harder. The way the pattern broke down in this session wasn't the worst case scenario, but it definitely wasn't ideal. Once we got into the right ball, into the right part of the lane, they became a little bit more manageable, but still significantly harder even than when they started. Of the 3 oil patterns that you're gonna see in this Sport Collection series, this Bear was easily the hardest one. Deciding what ball you're gonna throw on this Bear pattern can be especially tricky, because the pattern is 41 feet, which puts it into that medium category. Most house shots are also in that medium distance category. So if you throw a ball and it looks like you can play the same part of the lane as your house shot, just remember that the moves cannot be the same, because there's going to be a lot more volume overall on the lanes, but also there's going to be a huge out of bounds, which on house shots, there's typically 0 out of bounds. The thing about bowling in general is that you only get one opportunity to break down the lanes the right way. Even though we didn't break them down the right way, I still think that Andrew and myself did a pretty good job at finding a way to get our ball to get to the pocket. Andrew especially here was running into a lot of early hook, which is why he is about to get into his first ball change. And for me, I feel like I should have ball changed several shots ago, just to something that's going to be a little bit cleaner through the front and maybe a little bit more responsive in the back part of the lane. This next shot here for me was a clear indicator that I needed to be into a ball that was going to be cleaner through the front and a little bit more responsive down lane. But because the next shot struck, of course, I didn't ball change. Andrew's ball change into the Venom Shock was absolutely amazing. Pretty much as usual. The Venom Shock for him rolls so good. And ultimately, I think he could have started with the Venom Shock instead of the Forge Fire. I mean, don't get me wrong, I really like the way this Forge Flare rolled on this pattern. I just think that I definitely needed a little bit less surface, because even though it is a higher volume, there was a lot of friction on these lanes. So I'm thinking something like 3,000, maybe even 4,000 from a little bit straighter for me might have been the better option than this sandblasted Forge Flare that I had. But ultimately, I do make the right ball change and go into the Jackal Flash. Once I got into the Jackal Flash, I really felt like I had a little bit of room left and right. If I got the ball right a little bit, because it is an asymmetrical pearl, it did shape, especially more than the Forge Flare. And then if I missed left, again, because it is a pearl, it kind of just shimmed a little bit instead of taking off like some of the other balls did. Of all the balls that I threw on this pattern, this Jackal Flash easily gave me the best look on the lanes. So this is a asymmetrical pearl with a very low RG and a very high differential with a strong pearl cover. And then the finish that I had on it was about 3,000, which is why it looked so good. The one really big thing that I want you to take away from this last group of shots is that Andrew and myself both ball changed to the Jackal Flash. Now, the Flash looked really, really good off my hands, and then for Andrew, it didn't look quite as good. And that is because Andrew has a much higher rev rate, and obviously my rev rate's a little bit lower and a little bit more off to the side. So because of that, Andrew needed to be into a ball that was similar to this Jackal Flash, but less ball overall, less shape down lane overall, which is why he settled into the Fatal Venom. When it came time to selecting what balls we were going to throw and when we were going to ball change, I think Andrew and myself both did a pretty good job. I think for me personally, I could have gone into the Jackal Flash a little bit sooner than what I did, because the Flash looked really good when I went to it. I also think that both of us could have used a little bit less surface to start. And then I also think that I needed to get into the Venom Shock a lot sooner than what I did. Like, I should have taken a look at the Venom Shock on the fresh instead of going to it so late like you're about to see. The one big takeaway for me from shooting this Sport Collection series was just gaining the experience of bowling on these patterns. Now, what makes these pros so good, obviously, is the fact that they are incredibly accurate and they can repeat shot after shot after shot, but also is the amount of experience that they have on bowling on these patterns.
they already know what part of the lane they need to play on and what their progressions are going to be because they've done it so many times. So shooting this collection, the sport collection series, is really helping me gain an understanding of what my progressions need to be and when they need to be, and also what things I need to look for to make the ball change. I hope you guys are enjoying watching this sport collection series as much as Andrew and myself enjoyed filming this series. Be on the lookout for our next video where we are going to be bowling on the 48-foot PBA shark pattern.
Well, there you have it, folks. There's my in-depth analysis for the 2021 PBA Bare Oil pattern. Let me know down below in the comments if you guys like this video and if you want to see more videos on these tougher sport conditions as well. Click right here to watch one of my other videos. Click right here to subscribe. Till next time, guys.